A young billionaire married a black waitress, but at the wedding, she revealed a secret no one saw coming. Ethan Walker grew up in Salem, Oregon, in a house where money was always tight, but values were never in short supply. His father, a car mechanic, spent long days in a grease-stained uniform. His mother, a nurse, often worked double shifts at the local hospital. Together, they taught their son one lesson over and over: hard work is honest work. But Ethan dreamed bigger. He would lie awake at night, imagining skyscrapers, luxury cars, and a life where his family never had to worry about bills again. His father would shake his head and warn him, "Son, money that comes too easy leaves scars. Remember, we fix things with our hands, not by cutting corners." His mother added softly, "Wealth without worth will leave you empty." Ethan listened, but he didn't agree. He was determined to climb higher. That determination carried him to Portland State University, where he poured himself into computer science and finance. He skipped parties, stayed up through the night, and built a small idea into something that would change his life. A financial app that taught families how to save, budget, and climb out of debt. The world hailed him as a genius. Investors rushed in. By 27, Ethan was one of the youngest billionaires in the country. His picture was on glossy magazine covers, his speeches quoted at business conferences. But behind the wealth was silence. His father had passed away before seeing his success. His mother, Margaret, couldn't celebrate a fortune built on deals she worried were too ruthless. And Ethan himself? He sat alone in glass towers, wondering if money had given him freedom, or had simply built a bigger cage. It was on one of those lonely evenings, craving something real, that Ethan pulled a gray hoodie over his head and walked into a small roadside diner called Willow Lake Diner. He thought he was going there for coffee. He didn't know he was about to meet the woman who would change his life forever. The Willow Lake Diner wasn't glamorous. It was the kind of place where the booth sagged from years of use. The jukebox in the corner was more decoration than music, and the smell of fresh coffee never left the air. For Ethan, it was comforting, a place where nobody cared about bank accounts or magazine covers. But peace didn't last. Halfway through his meal, Ethan felt his throat tighten. He had unknowingly eaten something brushed with sesame oil. His chest burned, panic spread, and the fork slipped from his hand. The cook froze. Customers whispered, unsure what to do. Then she moved. A waitress sprinted from behind the counter, a young black woman with determined eyes and steady hands. Her dark curls were tied back, her apron crisp but worn from long shifts. Without hesitation, she grabbed the emergency EpiPen the diner kept on the wall. Kneeling beside him, she pressed it into his arm with practiced calm. "Breathe," she said firmly. "You're going to be all right." The color returned to Ethan's face. Air rushed back into his lungs. For a man who had built billion-dollar systems to control risk, it was humbling to realize his life had been saved by the quick action of a stranger. Her name tag read, Chloe Johnson. When Ethan finally steadied, he reached for his wallet and laid a thick stack of bills on the counter. Gratitude, for him, had always been measured in money. But Chloe shook her head. Her voice was calm, but carried weight. "I don't want your money. If you really want to thank me, put it into my math club. My kids need calculators more than I need cash in my pocket." Ethan froze. In his world, people clawed for tips, favors, connections, anything they could get from a billionaire. But this waitress, this black woman working late nights to make ends meet, pushed money away as though it meant nothing. He left that night alive, but unsettled. The question gnawed at him all the way home. Who was Chloe Johnson? Ethan returned to the Willow Lake Diner the very next week. He told himself it was for the coffee, but deep down, he knew the truth. He wanted to see Chloe again. She greeted him with the same quiet professionalism, carrying trays and refilling cups with a smile that was warm but reserved. Ethan noticed how she seemed to do everything at once, balancing orders, calming an elderly customer, even slipping a plate of fries to a teenager who clearly couldn't afford the bill. He watched her closely. There was something about Chloe Johnson that unsettled him. She carried herself with dignity, but there was no denying the weight on her shoulders. Over time, Ethan learned pieces of her story. Chloe wasn't just working nights at the diner. She was raising her two younger siblings. Marcus, 15, was bright, obsessed with numbers, and dreamed of becoming an engineer. Elena, 10, trailed behind with wide eyes and a book always tucked under her arm. Their mother had died suddenly, and their father had left long before that. Chloe had stepped in, determined that her brother and sister wouldn't fall through the cracks. What struck Ethan most was that Chloe didn't just fight for her family, she fought for her community. On Saturdays, she ran a volunteer program called Porchlight Learning, a math club for neighborhood kids. It wasn't much, a church basement with folding chairs, a chalkboard, and a box of gummy bears, but it was enough. Ethan went one afternoon, quietly slipping into the back. What he saw astonished him. Chloe had the kids laughing as she taught interest rates using candy. She used Monopoly money to explain budgeting. She turned credit scores into fairy tales where characters had to make wise choices to keep moving forward. The children leaned in, eyes wide, soaking up every word. For Ethan, it was like stepping into another world. His billion-dollar app gamified money on screens, but Chloe made financial literacy come alive in ways kids actually understood. When the lesson ended, she noticed him standing at the back. "You came," she said, wiping chalk from her hands. "I had to see it for myself," Ethan admitted. From that day, he began volunteering quietly at Porchlight. He let the kids laugh when he stumbled over math problems. He carried boxes, set up chairs, and watched Chloe in awe. For the first time in years, Ethan felt connected, not to money, not to fame, but to something real. And every night he left, one thought followed him home. Chloe Johnson wasn't just saving her siblings. She was saving a whole neighborhood. Ethan had grown used to late nights of silence, the glow of city lights bouncing off the walls of his penthouse. But now, he found himself counting the days until he could return to that small diner or Chloe's math club. It was a strange shift for a man who had been courted by investors, CEOs, and journalists. With Chloe, there were no cameras, no applause, only honesty. One Saturday, after helping her pack up folding chairs at Porchlight Learning, Ethan found the courage to ask, "Do you ever take time for yourself?" Chloe gave a short laugh. "Between double shifts, 2 kids at home, and a basement full of math students? Not really." "Then let me take you out," Ethan said, surprising himself with the words. "Not anywhere fancy, just out." Chloe hesitated. She had grown used to men underestimating her, or worse, trying to play savior. But there was something different in Ethan's eyes, earnestness, not pity. Finally, she nodded. "All right, but you pick somewhere real, not some 5-star tower in the city." That evening, Ethan took her to a street festival in downtown Portland, where food trucks lined the sidewalks, music filled the air, and laughter rose from families huddled under strings of lights. They ate tacos from paper plates, wandered past mural paintings, and stopped at a booth where a local jazz band played an old tune Chloe remembered her mother humming. For the first time in years, Chloe let herself relax. She even teased him when he struggled to keep rhythm as the music swayed the crowd. Ethan laughed, realizing it had been a long time since he felt so human. Afterward, they walked along the riverfront. Chloe pointed out the bridges she had crossed countless times, telling stories of her childhood. Ethan listened intently, recognizing how different their lives had been. For all his wealth, he had never known what it meant to fight day after day just to keep a family together. As they reached the edge of the water, Chloe grew quiet. "I know why you come around, Ethan," she said, "but I don't want to be someone's charity project. I've worked too hard to stand on my own." Ethan stopped, the weight of her words sinking in. "I don't see you as charity, Chloe. I see you as someone who's stronger than anyone I've ever met. I don't want to fix you. I want to learn from you." Chloe studied him for a long moment, her expression softening. Then, almost reluctantly, she smiled. "That's a good answer." The night ended with a quiet walk back to her car, but something unspoken lingered between them. A spark had been lit. And for the first time, Ethan wondered if what he had always longed for wasn't found in wealth, but in a woman who carried dignity and fire in equal measure. For weeks, Ethan balanced 2 lives. By day, he was the face of Walker Capital, signing contracts, addressing conferences, and appearing in glossy business magazines. By night, he was just Ethan, slipping into the Willow Lake Diner or volunteering at Porchlight Learning. Around Chloe, he could forget the weight of his name, and for a while it worked. But secrets don't stay hidden forever. One afternoon, Chloe arrived at the diner to find whispers rippling among the staff. A customer had left behind a folded magazine. On its cover was a sharp-suited man standing in front of glass towers. The headline reading, "Ethan Walker, the billionaire who changed finance." Chloe froze. The face staring back from the glossy page was the same man who had been carrying boxes at her math club. The same man who had eaten tacos with her under string lights. The same man who claimed to be ordinary. When Ethan walked in that evening, she didn't greet him with her usual calm smile. Instead, she held up the magazine and said, "Care to explain this?" Ethan's heart sank. He had dreaded this moment. Sitting down across from her, he tried to speak carefully. "I didn't want you to know me that way. I wanted you to see me before you saw the money." Chloe's eyes narrowed. "So, you let me believe you were just another volunteer, while the whole time you were one of the richest men in the country. Do you have any idea how that makes me feel?" "Chloe," Ethan said softly, "I wasn't trying to deceive you. I just needed, for once, to be seen as a man, not a bank account. People come to me for what I can give them. You were the first person who ever pushed money away. That's what drew me to you." Chloe leaned back, her arms crossed. The weight of betrayal pressed on her chest. "I don't care about your money, Ethan, but I do care about honesty. If we're going to be anything more than strangers, you have to understand that." For the first time in years, Ethan felt afraid, not of losing deals or investors, but of losing the one person who had made him feel real. "Then I'll tell you everything," he promised. "No more secrets." The tension between them lingered as Chloe stood, torn between anger and compassion. She didn't walk away, but she didn't forgive him either. Instead, she said quietly, "We'll see if your actions match your word." And with that, she left the diner, leaving Ethan staring at the empty booth, realizing that this, more than any business deal, was a test he couldn't afford to fail. The days after Chloe discovered the truth were some of the longest of Ethan's life. He threw himself into work, but every polished meeting room and every glowing screen felt hollow. At night, he would catch himself staring at his phone, drafting messages to her, only to erase them before sending. He had promised her honesty, but he also knew that promises meant little without action. Finally, he reached out, not with gifts or grand gestures, but with a simple message. "Would you meet me at the park where we first talked about life?" Chloe considered ignoring it. Part of her wanted to, but another part, the one that remembered his laughter at the street festival and the way he knelt in a chalk-dusted basement with kids correcting his math, told her to go. When she arrived, Ethan was already there, sitting on a bench beneath the old oak trees. He stood as soon as he saw her, nervous in a way he never was in front of investors or cameras. "Chloe," he began, his voice steady but low, "I can't undo what I kept from you, but I want you to know me, all of me. No more walls, no more masks." He spoke of his childhood in Salem, his parents' warnings about wealth without worth, the nights of coding that built his empire, and the emptiness that followed. He told her about his mother, Margaret, who still hadn't fully accepted what he had become. He even admitted the mistakes, deals signed too quickly, corners cut too sharply, the weight of choices that haunted him. Chloe listened in silence. When he finished, she folded her arms and said, "Words are easy, Ethan. Show me that you mean them." It wasn't a rejection. It was a challenge. From that day, Ethan began showing up differently. He didn't just volunteer at Porch Light. He listened to the kids, took their ideas seriously, and laughed at their jokes. He didn't just walk Chloe home after late shifts. He carried bags of groceries and made sure Marcus and Elena got to school on time when Chloe was stretched thin. Slowly, trust began to rebuild, not through speeches, but through small, steady actions. And as the weeks passed, something shifted between them. Chloe found herself softening, caught off guard by the sight of Ethan helping Elena build a cardboard castle or Marcus explaining algebra to him as if he were the student. The billionaire was learning to live like an ordinary man, and he seemed happier for it. One evening, as they walked along the riverfront again, Ethan stopped and turned to her. "Chloe, I don't just want to be in your life as a helper or a friend. I want to build a future with you." She studied him carefully, the city lights reflecting in her eyes. "Then you'd better be sure, Ethan, because my life isn't easy, and love doesn't pay the bills." Ethan smiled, not dismissing her warning but embracing it. Then let me stand with you in the hard parts. That's the only future I want. For the first time since discovering his secret, Chloe believed him. By the time spring rolled into Portland, Ethan knew he couldn't wait any longer. He had rebuilt Chloe's trust, brick by brick. But he wanted more than her forgiveness. He wanted her future, every part of it. The laughter and the struggles, the math clubs and late-night shifts. The life of a woman who carried her family and her community on her shoulders. He began planning quietly. It couldn't be flashy. Chloe hated spectacle. It had to be meaningful, tied to the moments they shared and the dreams she held close. One evening, after Chloe finished her shift at the diner, Ethan offered to drive her. Instead of heading home, he asked if she would take a small detour. "Just trust me," he said with a smile. The car wound through the countryside until they reached the edge of the Willamette Valley. There, tethered in an open field, stood a brilliant red hot air balloon, glowing against the dusk sky. Chloe stared in disbelief. "Ethan, what is this?" He held out his hand. "Do you trust me?" Her heart pounded, but she nodded. Together, they climbed into the basket. The burner hissed, the ropes released, and slowly the balloon lifted into the evening sky. The field spread out below them, green and golden, and the river shimmered like a ribbon under the last rays of sunlight. As the ground fell away, Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. His hands trembled, not from fear of heights, but from the weight of what he was about to ask. "Chloe Johnson," he began, his voice steady but full of emotion. "You are the strongest, most selfless person I have ever known. You saved my life that night in the diner. But more than that, you've taught me what it means to live with purpose. You've shown me that wealth without worth is empty, and love without honesty is fragile. I don't want to spend another day without you. Will you marry me?" He opened the box, revealing a delicate ring with a heart-shaped pink gemstone. Chloe's breath caught. Tears filled her eyes, not because of the jewel, but because of the man kneeling before her, vulnerable and true. "Yes, Ethan," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Of course I will." Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger, and as the balloon rose higher, they held each other tightly. For a moment, it felt as if the whole world had fallen away, leaving only the two of them drifting among the clouds. The weeks after Ethan's proposal passed in a blur of preparation. Chloe kept the plan simple. "I don't want chandeliers or marble halls," she told him. "I want something honest, something that feels like us." They chose Crystal Lake Lodge, a rustic venue with wide verandas overlooking a still blue lake. Chloe decorated the invitations herself, pressing sprigs of lavender into the corners. Lavender her late mother had once grown in their small backyard. It was her way of carrying a piece of her mother into the day. Ethan's mother, Margaret, agreed to attend. She had often disapproved of his business empire, but when Ethan told her about Chloe, she saw something different in her son. "If she chose you," Margaret said, "then maybe you've finally chosen the kind of life I always hoped for you." Chloe's siblings, Marcus and Elena, were overjoyed. Marcus practiced his speech as best man, while Elena drew little flowers for the table cards. The kids from Porchlight Learning even pitched in, stringing paper lanterns and folding napkins. The wedding felt less like a society event and more like a community celebration. On the morning of the ceremony, the sky was clear and bright. Guests gathered on the veranda, violins filling the air. Chloe walked down the aisle in a flowing white silk gown, her veil trailing softly behind her. Ethan stood at the altar, his tuxedo pressed, but his hands trembling. The vows were spoken, the rings exchanged, and the officiant pronounced them husband and wife. Applause rose, and Ethan kissed his bride, believing their story had reached its happiest moment. But when the reception began and the microphone was passed to Chloe, she surprised everyone. Her voice carried steady across the veranda as she said, "Before I give my vows to Ethan in front of all of you, I need to speak the truth." The veranda hushed as Chloe's words cut through the music and laughter. "This marriage is not just about love, it's about responsibility." Guests stilled in their seats, their smiles fading. Ethan turned toward her, his heart pounding as he saw not joy, but fierce resolve in her eyes. She lifted the microphone higher, her hands trembling. "Most of you know me only as a waitress, but that isn't the whole truth. Until I was 22, I lived in comfort. My father owned a chain of technology schools that educated thousands across the city. We had a good life. Big house, travels, opportunities. My mother, before she passed, used to tell me I was born with every advantage. Her voice faltered. She drew a breath. But then everything crumbled. A young man launched an online academy that was cheaper, faster, more accessible. Within 2 years, my father's schools were bankrupt. He couldn't bear the shame. He walked out on us and never came back. My mother's health had already been failing, and soon I was left alone, with Marcus and Elena depending on me. From that day forward, I worked any job I could find. That's how I ended up in a diner apron. Murmurs spread through the crowd. Ethan's breath caught. He knew exactly where this was going, but he couldn't stop her words. Chloe's eyes fixed on him now, shimmering with unshed tears. That young businessman who built his empire while mine collapsed was you, Ethan. Gasps rippled across the veranda. Margaret's hand flew to her mouth. Claire Davis leaned forward in her seat, her lips tightening in grim recognition. Ethan's world tilted. He thought back to the late nights, the rise of his platform, the competitors who disappeared as his empire grew. He had always told himself it was progress, disruption, innovation. He had never once thought about the families left in the rubble. Chloe's voice softened, but it carried with unmistakable strength. I didn't know when we met. To me, you were just a kind stranger who made my heart beat faster. But my family recognized you from the magazines. They knew. And now I do too. So before God and everyone here, I had to tell the truth, because a marriage built on silence is no marriage at all. The crowd was silent, stunned. Ethan stepped forward, his voice breaking. Chloe, I never knew. I never wanted to hurt you. I was chasing a dream, blind to the cost. If I had known... Chloe shook her head, tears spilling now. I believe you, Ethan. But belief doesn't erase what happened. If our love is real, then it has to hold more than just the two of us. It has to face the wreckage of the past and be strong enough to build something better. Ethan's chest ached. He understood then, this was the true vow, the one that mattered. To love Chloe meant to carry not just her joy, but her scars. And unless he accepted both, he would lose her. For a long moment after Chloe's confession, no one moved. The veranda was heavy with silence, broken only by the sound of the lake stirring beyond the railing. Some guests stared at their shoes. Others exchanged nervous whispers, while Margaret lowered her head and clasped her hands tightly in her lap. Ethan stood motionless beside Chloe, his vows still ringing in his ears, yet already hollow in the shadow of her truth. The guests had applauded their love minutes ago, but now all eyes pressed on him with an unspoken question. Would he answer her? He opened his mouth, but no words came. For once, the man who could command boardrooms and sway investors found himself stripped of language. His empire had been built on certainty, yet here he was, mute before the one person who demanded more than profits and headlines. Chloe placed the microphone down on the table, her hands trembling. She did not look at him as she stepped away from the veranda, her veil trailing like a ghost of the promise they had just made. Marcus and Elena rose quickly to follow, their young faces pale with confusion. Guests parted to let them pass, their murmurs swelling as the bride disappeared into the twilight. Ethan remained at the front, every nerve in his body urging him to run after her, but his legs locked beneath the weight of shame. His gaze fell to the lavender sprigs scattered across the floor, remnants of the bouquet she had dropped in her haste. A symbol of her late mother's blessing, now broken underfoot. Margaret rose quietly and touched her son's arm. Ethan, she whispered, her voice thick with sorrow. Don't let her carry this alone, not like I carried your father's choices. Her words cut sharper than any investor's criticism, reminding him that silence could wound as deeply as betrayal. Ethan swallowed hard, finally breaking free of his paralysis, but by the time he stepped down from the veranda, Chloe was gone. A car engine faded into the night, carrying with it the woman he loved and the vows he had failed to honor. The guests dispersed uneasily, leaving him alone with Margaret. Claire lingered at the edge of the veranda, her expression unreadable, as though she were already calculating what this public fracture meant for Walker Capital. Ethan stood beneath the lanterns, tuxedo clinging damp to his skin, and realized the truth. The wedding had given him a wife only in name, Unless he faced the ruins of Chloe's past and the cost of his own success, he might never truly have her at all. In the days after the wedding, Ethan moved through life like a ghost. The vows he had spoken felt hollow in the silence Chloe left behind. She didn't call, didn't write. Marcus and Elena stayed close to her, and Ethan respected the distance, but every night he lay awake wondering if he had lost her forever. Weeks slipped by. Work no longer mattered. Headlines no longer mattered. Only the ache of her absence. He sent flowers, notes, even tried showing up at the diner, but Chloe kept her distance. Then one autumn evening, fate answered. Ethan wandered through the park where they had once walked beneath the trees, where she had teased him about coincidences. And there she was, sitting on the same bench by the fountain, her face turned toward the water, lost in thought. His breath caught. He approached quietly, his voice breaking the still air. "Chloe?" She turned, startled. Her eyes shimmered with both sorrow and longing. After a long pause, she whispered, "Hello, Ethan." For a long moment, neither of them moved. The fountain whispered behind them, the autumn air carrying the faint scent of fallen leaves. Ethan sat slowly on the other end of the bench, leaving space between them. "I didn't expect to see you here," Chloe said softly, her hands clasped in her lap. "I didn't expect to see you either," Ethan admitted. His voice was rough, unused to speaking words that mattered. "But I've thought of you every day since that night." Chloe's eyes flickered toward him, then back to the water. "I thought walking away would make it easier. But it didn't. Nothing about this has been easy." Ethan leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "Chloe, I can't change what happened. I can't bring back your father or your mother, or erase the damage my choices caused. But I can choose differently now. I can build differently. If you'll let me." Tears welled in her eyes, though her voice stayed steady. "I missed you too, but I needed to know if you loved me, or the idea of me. Because I don't come alone, Ethan. I carry my siblings. I carry the kids at Porchlight. I carry all the scars of what your world left behind." Ethan turned to her fully, his voice breaking. "Then let me carry them with you. I don't want love that's easy. I want love that's true." At last, Chloe looked into his eyes. For a long breath, silence hung between them. Then she reached across the space, her hand finding his. "Then we start again," she whispered. Ethan squeezed her hand, relief flooding him like sunlight breaking through clouds. In that moment, they both knew. The past would always be there, but so would their choice to build a future stronger than its shadows. That weekend, Chloe finally agreed to take Ethan to the modest house where Marcus and Elena lived. For Ethan, this meeting mattered more than any boardroom or contract. If her siblings rejected him, he feared Chloe's love would crumble under their disapproval. The small brick house looked worn but alive. With flower pots on the porch and curtains Chloe had helped Elena sew. Marcus opened the door first, his broad shoulders filling the frame. His expression hardened the moment he saw Ethan. "You came," Marcus said flatly. His tone carried no welcome. Chloe stepped forward, her hand gripping Ethan's. "I asked him to, Marcus. Please, just hear him out." Inside, Elena sat at the table, her eyes sharp but uncertain. She had grown up faster than her years, carrying too much responsibility since their parents were gone. She didn't rise when Ethan entered. Ethan drew a steady breath. "I know I represent everything that tore your lives apart. My company didn't just build schools, it pushed others out. I didn't see the human cost until Chloe showed me. I can't undo the past, but I can choose to stand with you now." The silence was heavy. Marcus folded his arms, studying him. "Words won't fix what you broke. Chloe deserves someone who shows up, not someone who hides behind excuses." Ethan didn't flinch. "Then let me show up. For Chloe. For both of you. Judge me by what I do next, not by what I didn't know then." For a long moment, only the clock ticked on the wall. Then Elena finally spoke, her voice quiet but piercing. "She loves you. That's why we'll give you one chance. But if you hurt her again, Ethan, you'll answer to us." Ethan nodded, humbled. "That's all I ask, one chance." That evening, the four of them shared dinner. The tension never fully disappeared, but something shifted. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the first fragile step toward trust. As they left later that night, Chloe slipped her hand into Ethan's. "You didn't try to buy their love," she whispered. You earned a little of their respect instead. Ethan kissed her forehead softly. That's enough for me, for now. Time began to soften the sharp edges between Ethan and Chloe's siblings. He visited often, not with lavish gifts, but with quiet gestures, helping Marcus patch the roof, teaching Elena how to balance a budget for her studies, sitting with them on long evenings when memories of their parents weighed heavy. Slowly, the bitterness began to thaw. For Chloe, it wasn't Ethan's wealth that mattered. It was the man who stayed when things got difficult, the man willing to face her past instead of running from it. She no longer saw him as the billionaire who had unknowingly ruined her father's livelihood, but as the partner who chose to carry her burdens with her. Months later, as the four of them walked together through the very park where Ethan and Chloe had first confessed their feelings, the siblings finally gave their blessing. It wasn't dramatic, no speeches, no tears, just Marcus clapping Ethan's shoulder and Elena smiling at Chloe with quiet approval. Yet to Ethan, it meant everything. From that day, Ethan and Chloe's love grew not in spite of their trials, but because of them. They learned that true wealth isn't measured in millions, but in trust rebuilt, in scars faced honestly, and in the courage to begin again. And so their story became more than a romance. It became a reminder that love strong enough to survive hardship can transform enemies into family and turn broken beginnings into something whole. What do you think, dear friends? Should Chloe have trusted Ethan after learning the truth? Or was forgiveness too great a risk? Share your thoughts in the comments. We love hearing your wisdom and experiences. Thank you for being part of this journey with us. Your support means more than you know.